Preliminary information confirmed the killing of the Minister of Interior of Ukraine, his deputy, and the Minister of State for Internal Affairs, as well as some of the leaders of the first internal ranks on the side in Ukraine. The plane carrying 9 people on board crashed in the Ukrainian capital in an area called Pravry Yar, which is approximately 25 km from the center of the capital. Up to this point, preliminary information confirms the killing of 18 people and 22 others were injured, but the Ukrainian police said that investigations are continuing to find out the circumstances of this accident, but it is likely by many that the accident was a result of the power outage and the lack of communication between the flight and the control room, especially since there were warnings from the meteorologists that today there will be a lot of fog in the air in Ukraine and some winds, but until this moment, there is no confirmed information about the circumstances of this accident and how this plane fell, especially since this plane with goods took off and soon fell at about 10 o'clock. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the Russian forces are now imposing full control over the town of Sol in the Donetsk region. Russian field progress came after Moscow announced last week its full control of the neighboring strategic city of Soledar. On the other hand, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that there is absolutely no doubt that Moscow will emerge victorious in the Ukraine war, despite the military setbacks in the attack, which lasted about a year. During the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the lifting of the siege of Leningrad, Putin told military factory workers in St. Petersburg that the unity and solidarity of the Russian people, the courage of the Russian fighters, and the continued work of the military-industrial sector, victory is guaranteed. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has confirmed that Russian relations with the Arab world are improving. During his annual speech to the media about Russian foreign policy, the Russian foreign minister expressed his country's understanding of Turkish concern about the presence of Kurdish militants in northern Syria. He also said that our relations with the Arab world are improving. First and foremost in trade and economic relations, we must take into account the illegal sanctions and suffering we are witnessing from those who run the international financial system. The Russian army forces are advancing in the direction of the city of Seversk, after controlling the train stations that were providing logistical support to the city, and the strategic communications between them and the city of Bakhmut were cut off. Russian forces cut off the road between Soledar and Severizhsk under air and artillery bombardment and Russia's control of the strategic road. The Russian forces are advancing in the direction of the outskirts of the city through 2 axes, where Russia is now pressing on the concentrations of Ukrainian forces in Severizhsk from the eastern and southern flank, as well as Russia's control of several fortified sites belonging to the Ukrainian forces on the line Marinka and Agildar. Russia stormed the town of Novomkovka, dispersing the force of the Ukrainian army, and preventing them from regrouping its forces. The specialized American website published a very important article about the TOS-1 missile launchers, which caused the surrender of Ukrainian forces, the deployment of 220mm TOS-1 missile artillery systems. It was a key to facilitating the surrender of the units of the Ukrainian forces, where the NATO personnel fortified in shelters and bunkers were annihilated, as the TOS-1 launchers are distinguished by their ability to hit fortifications and destroy hard, concrete and metal shields. The chemical interacts with the atmospheric air and oxygen, then creates a thermal destructive wave. The Russian missile can destroy fortifications even underground. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine traveled to Poland to meet with the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, General Mark Milley, who arrived in Poland to prepare for the largest meeting of NATO, which will take place on January 20 at the U.S. Air Force Base Ramstein in Germany. The conference will discuss a plan to support Ukraine in the next stage, as Ukraine hopes to obtain from NATO hundreds of modern Western tanks and offensive weapons to improve the collapsed situation on the front with Russia and launch counterattacks on the Russian army. The British Guardian newspaper said the number of tanks that Britain intends to send to Ukraine. It will not change the balance of power on the battlefield, and the number of 14 Challenger tanks is never sufficient, and Ukraine needs hundreds of modern tanks in rebuilding the destroyed Ukrainian armor weapon, especially if Ukraine wants to carry out counterattacks against Russian positions. Because the attack on the positions of the Russian army exposes Ukraine's tanks to direct fire from artillery, missile launchers, and Russian drones, unlike if Ukraine was in defense mode, Ukraine is planning to launch a counter-attack on Russia, which will need hundreds of modern tanks. CNN said that America has turned Ukraine into a large laboratory to test modern American weapons against Russia's forces. The testing of American weapons was a shock to America, with many weaknesses emerging and terrible problems with American weapons, meaning, for example, the American M777 howitzers, in which many weaknesses appeared in operation, maintenance, and transportation. And it caused a massacre of the American cannons, which were attacked every day by Russia, as well as the American Switchblade 300 planes, which appeared very weak and did not achieve the required goal, despite the passing of thousands of drones to Ukraine. Also, problems arose with the American armored vehicles and weapons, in the very difficult climatic conditions, and did not suit the environment of the Ukraine war at all, in terms of rain, mud, and agricultural lands.